Looking for a guaranteed way to create content that resonates with your audience? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients and let them choose the topic of the interview. Because if your ideal clients care about the topic, there's a good chance the rest of your audience will care about it too. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to the B2B Growth Show, a podcast dedicated to helping B2B executives achieve explosive growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. I'm Jonathan Green.
And I'm James Carberry.
Let's get into the show. Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. Today we are joined by Brad Hess. Brad is the Director of Demand Generation at Ceros. Brad, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jonathan.
It's great to have you here. We've been trying to get you on the show for a couple weeks, so this is perfect. My computer died on me earlier this weekend, so I managed to scramble together some backup equipment to make sure we didn't have to reschedule. And today we're going to be talking about content distribution and promotion, which I think is very cool. But before we get into today's topic, maybe you can tell our listeners a little about what you and your team at Ceros are up to these days.
Sure. So Ceros is an interactive content creation platform, and it's a design platform to create any kind of content that you want without any coding. So, we get a lot of clients who bring or have very advanced content marketing programs, and they're looking to add interactivity. They're looking to get to that next step. And so they definitely have these robust content promotion strategies in place. But we also get some clients who don't necessarily know what to do after they've created the content. So I'd love to chat about that here today. And that's actually something I get to do quite a bit here as the Director of Demand Gen, both promoting and helping to create and ideate for the content that we create for our programs here.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about today's topic because, I feel like we've had a lot of guests on the show and just people out there talking about, gotta create content, but you get to this idea of you've created this content, now what? And the idea that if you build it, they will come just doesn't really hold water. So Brad, I'm going to let you kind of take it away. You've created the content, now what?
Yeah, so you've created the content. Well, actually, let's take it back, because before you create the content, I think what you need to do is figure out what your audience actually wants. Because too often, I think as marketers, and especially in B2B, we think very product focused. We think very much about ourselves and our product and what our content program needs. But what we should be thinking about is, what does our audience need? And not how are we going to drive people down this stage of the funnel, really thinking about how is this user going to get to the next stage of their journey. And so with that, it's really important to define your audience. So, with this content piece, who is it that you're trying to reach? And, what is your objective with them? So if it's a top of funnel audience who doesn't know your brand at all, it's a lot different from somebody who is a customer that you're looking to educate a little bit further. And so knowing who that audience is, really defining them from the outset is important. And then additionally, looking at the industry at large and the interests of that audience. So I like to use a tool like BuzzSumo or social listening tools to understand, with regards to your topic or your general topic area, what are people talking about there? What's really resonating with the audience there already? Another good tool to look at would be Ahrefs or SEMrush to identify from a search standpoint which keywords are really driving interest. And with that basis, then, you're able to really identify which specific topics are going to resonate most with your audience. One other area that I would point out that very often gets overlooked are interviews. So doing some sort of qualitative research to talk to your audience and actually learn from them. Too often I've been guilty of this, where we just jump into a content project and say, well, I have a pretty good idea for my audience. I know what they want. But then when you take the time to actually go and interview them, what they want is something completely different from what you thought. So no matter how good you think you know your customer or how good you think you know your audience, doing those interviews, you're always going to find something surprising.
Yeah, I'm sure it can certainly provide a healthy perspective, one that's different from your own. It's, especially if you're bringing some preconceived notions to the table. Brad, do you have a strategy that works for you when you are trying to, book these interviews? How would you incentivize these people to provide you with that kind of information, to get time on their calendar, to ask them the right kinds of questions? Do you have a strategy for that?
That's a good question, and we've employed a few different strategies, and it really depends on who it is that you're interviewing. So in one example, we've interviewed influencers to get their thoughts, but then actually also to use those thoughts to create the content, and we've injected those thoughts into the content. So there, the incentive was pretty obvious. They were able to be featured in this piece of content. Another incentive, we've tested out gift cards, so you can give away a Starbucks gift card or something a little bit smaller. Also, for customers or people who are a little bit more engaged, a T-shirt or some sort of swag could be enough to entice them. That's a few of the ways that we've tried to drive those interviews. But certainly, I think if you're able to explain to them the value of their interview to the overall audience, that's always a good place to start.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. All right, so you've gotten to this point where you've started to figure out what your audience wants, what your audience needs. What's next from there?
So you've got to define the objective for this campaign from the outset. Too often I see somebody come in and say, well, we want to make an infographic. And you say, well, why? Why should it be an infographic, right?
Because they look so cool, right? Yeah.
Well, and you're right, especially interactive infographics built in Ceros. That was my shill moment. Only sort of kidding, but they do look good. Anyhow, so with that objective defined, I think you're able to better really identify what kind of content is going to fit your objective, or multiple pieces of content in this case for a larger campaign. So, if your objective is something like lead generation, you obviously want to have that lead gen component built into your content, or have your complementary pieces of content pointing to a landing page that does have that lead gen component. Then once you've identified that objective and built the content out, we're jumping way ahead. So you've identified the objective, you've done all the hard work to create a piece of content that drives towards that objective. The one area that I find really helpful before you start promoting it everywhere and spreading on social media and sharing with your email list is to actually test the headlines and the imagery. The best places to do that, I would recommend you could use a tool like Optimizely to actually test it on the page, testing through Facebook ads, through dark posts, where you can test multiple iterations and find the ones that are going to get the highest engagement or the highest click-through rate. Mm-hmm. That's going to enable you to start with a really strong foundation where you've now tested multiple iterations of headline and image combinations and found the one that's going to resonate best with that audience. And that can look a few different ways. So I know if you're familiar with Priceonomics, they recommend this, and they actually have a content studio that enables you to do it, but there's also other tools out there.
Yep.
And, basically it enables you to test headlines and images without ever having the piece finished. So when someone clicks through, it says, thanks for being a part of this test. So that's on the far end of the spectrum. I think that for me personally, our brand doesn't want to do that. We like to have something of value on the other end of that click. So in our case, that just looks like after the piece is created, we'd run through for the first week of testing all these various iterations until we find that headline and image combo that works best. And then that's where we go on full blast with all of the rest of our promotion.
Yep, makes a lot of sense. So, all right, so Brad, you've given us then a few key ways in which you can sort of test the delivery, optimize the delivery. And I think today we were also going to talk a little about sort of what types of content work well with each other and the danger of repeating yourself. You've generated a piece of content, you want to repurpose it, you kind of want to get as much juice out of that as possible, but you don't want to just rest on that one piece and churn it out again and again and again, just different versions of it, right?
Yeah, it's a hard balance because so often I think the best practice that's advocated by a lot of content marketing influencers and thought leaders is to, build out a flagship piece of content like an ebook or a guide or a white paper. And then you've got your blog posts and you've got your infographics and all these other pieces that are now built off of that. And that's great. I definitely, in a lot of cases, that's the way to go. But if each piece is just a rehashing of the next, then, I think the user at the end of the day is going to feel somewhat cheated. And that's something that you don't necessarily see in the analytics. But, if you don't have something unique to offer at each touch point, then they're going to get a little bit tired. They might not come back to your site, the next time that you're sending them an email or they see you in your social feed. So by ensuring that you're adding something to the story in each piece, I'd say that is key. And also having a variety of different content types. So, the same person who consumes a blog post might not be the same person who really enjoys social videos. Similarly, you could have a piece that would tease to the ebook or to a larger guide. That could be an infographic or maybe a quiz or assessment. So I think that it's key to have complementary pieces, but the overlap should be minimal. You don't want to be rehashing the same thing over and over again.
Yep, makes a lot of sense. Brad, is there anything then that we haven't gotten a chance to touch on yet that you wanted to mention before we let you go today?
Well, the one thing that I would say is, when it comes to content promotion, the one really hot phrase right now is influencer marketing. And, with here at Ceros, we've hung our hat on a different catchphrase on interactive content, but I still feel very strongly that influencer marketing, especially in B2B, is the way to go. And not to say that should stand alone, because what it does is it enables your campaigns to have that little bit more firepower that they need to perform on social or to perform in email. When you have that name recognition, when you have the referrals that are generated from influencer outreach, as well as the social amplification that influencers provide, I would say that is a vital part of the B2B marketing mix in 2017.
Perfect. Again, we've gotten a chance to talk with Brad Hess today, content distribution and promotion. Brad, thanks so much for your time. It was a pleasure having you on the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
If you've been getting value from this podcast, you can help us reach more people by reviewing the show on iTunes. Here's how you can leave a review in less than a minute. Open your podcast app and tap the search icon in the bottom right corner. Type in B2B growth, then select our show. Once you're there, tap the reviews tab and tell us what you think of the show. These reviews help us out a ton.
Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.